Hello everyone, welcome to Sports Source, General Source of Sports, and today we're going to be looking at the 2019 NHL playoffs. Now, the announcement has just been made, all of the matchups have been set, so we're going to be looking at each series in the first round, and just my whole playoff predictions, and then the second round, third round, and then the Stanley Cup final. Now, there's lots of not lots of upsets I have, but I really like my bracket. I've been thinking about this for a really long time, ever since it was announced. I've been tossing and turning on lots of these matchups. Some of them were an easy decision for me, but some of them not so much. So if you did enjoy the video, and if you are want to support the channel, like this video and subscribe for more NHL news and discussion. Without further ado, let's start with our first playoff matchup. So our first playoff matchup here is Calgary versus Colorado. Now this is very easy for me. I see some people being brave and playing Colorado over Calgary, but I don't really see it. Calgary has been on a tear this whole season. Their offense has just been amazing. Their defense is amazing. Mark Giordano led the league in plus-minus. He's a great leader. The only concern with them is goaltending, but Colorado doesn't have an elite netminder to let them pay for it. So I'm going to go with Calgary in this series. Colorado, they do have McKinnon, Landeskog, and Rantanen. I'm really interested to see how they work the lines, because they did start them out all together at the start of the season and started to work out. And then they kind of separated them for a little bit of the season. So I want to see how they do the lines and stuff. They got two real defensemen. I mean, Eric Johnson, Tyson Barrie. But they lack a lot of depth. They don't have the same star power. And you need depth in the playoffs, and Colorado just doesn't have that depth that Calgary does have, because they have Lindholm, Gaudreau, Monahan, Derek Ryan, all those guys that could really help them out, and even the defensive depth, one of the best defensive cores in the league. So I'm going with Calgary. It's a no-brainer for me. Calgary moving on to the second round. Next up is probably one of the toughest, and probably, I forgot to mention for the last one, I think it's going to be Calgary in 5 games. But this one, San Jose versus the Las Vegas, or the Vegas Golden Knights. Now, this series is going to be a nail-biter. I have it going to the 7 games. And we're just going to look at these two teams. So I really like Vegas' offense. I think that Mark Stone has something to improve in the playoffs. Max Pacioretty, I want to see him do really good in the playoffs. Paul Stastny has some good playoff experience. You also got William Karlsson, who has something to prove in this playoffs. He wants to repeat his success from last year. You got Marshall, you got Riley Smith. You got a very good top 6 forwards. And you also, on San Jose, there's Couture, there's Hurdle, there's Thornton, and they got that defense too. Vegas's only weakness is the defense. I think that the offense and the defense match up pretty well. It's pretty close, but the one main deciding factor for me, which I think will be the ultimate X factor in the series, and I think that will win Vegas the series, is Marc-Andre Fleury. I am not a big fan of Martin Jones in the playoffs. He hasn't been doing that great this season. And even though San Jose has been doing really good, I'm not a real big fan of Martin Jones and how his play is going to be transferred over to the playoffs. And I think Marc-Andre Fleury's got that experience. He's one of the best goalies, if not the best goalie, in the playoffs, with all the goalies in the playoffs. But, I think that he's going to not steal this series, but he's definitely going to contribute to that series. I think it's going to go the whole distance, 7 games, and I got Vegas coming out on top. Now, this next matchup is very interesting. It's between Nashville and the Dallas Stars. Now, the Dallas Stars, they've been doing decent this year. They made the playoffs, so there's that. They were out of it for a bit, but their offense is actually 29th, which is weird because they have Radulov, Seguin. Ben has not had the greatest season this year, but their offensive depth is just not there. They do not have good offensive depth at all, and that is one of their main concerns. Defensively, they got Klingberg and Heiskanen, who have been doing really, really good this season, but again, not much depth. But in net, Ben Bishop has been proven to be one of the best goalies this season. He's been playing like it. Now, Nashville, obviously, they have one of the best offensive depths in the league. They have one of the best defensive depths in the league. They have one of the most experienced goaltenders in the league. My head is really, really telling me Nashville. They're telling me Nashville is going to win this in 6. But I have a gut feeling that Dallas is going to upset. Now, this series could go either way, but I have a gut feeling that Dallas is going to win this series. And if Nashville wins this series, it'll be expected, but I want to go with a little bit of a bold prediction. I think that Dallas is going to win this series in 6 games. They're just a very strong team. Their depth won't really show as much because Ben, Seguin, Radulov, they're all going to be doing good, hopefully, in this first round against Nashville. Nashville's been on a little bit. They've been heating up a bit, but I think that Dallas will be able to neutralize them and move on to the second round. Now, for most people, this is the hardest series to predict. It's Winnipeg and St. Louis. Lots of people, I've seen it very split, but I am a Winnipeg Jets fan, diehard Winnipeg Jets fan. I've been a fan, loyal fan, ever since they've relocated back to Winnipeg. And you know who I'm taking, right? I'm taking St. Louis in 6 games, It's just a tough pick because I've been watching the Jets more intently, or I've been watching them more than anyone, right? So I know their struggles more. And maybe there's a little bit of reverse bias where I see their flaws more than other people see their flaws. Maybe that's a good thing, maybe that's a bad thing. But Winnipeg has not been able to close out games at all. Morrissey is still injured. I am not completely sure when he's going to come back. Line A is going to be a big deciding factor. He didn't do that great in the playoffs this season. This season, he's been very, very hot and cold. It's hard to get him going. And it's hard for in the playoffs. Like, this Winnipeg Jets team is ice cold right now. And it's hard to get a team going once you're in the playoffs. You want to heat up going into the playoffs. And that's exactly what St. Louis did. Jordan Binnington, he's just been amazing. Their whole team has just been amazing. At one point, they were one of the worst teams in the league. And they just picked it up. And then now they're in the playoffs, and I have them beating the Winnipeg Jets. It's nothing personal against the Jets. I think that's just too good of a story as well. St. Louis has never won a Stanley Cup. They fired their coach, Mike Yeo, in I think January. There was some trade rumors with Tarasenko that he might get traded. And, Ryan O'Reilly came to the team. They had a big offseason. I think this team is destined to go all the way. They're my Cinderella story for this year, and I have them going past Winnipeg for the first round. It's really going to hurt my heart, but that's just what I have. Moving on to the East, this is one of the easiest ones. Tampa Bay versus Columbus. I have Tampa Bay. Not much explanation here. Tampa Bay is having a killer season. Columbus barely snuck in. I think that I really like Columbus's defense, and I think that their defense might be better than Tampa's. They have really good defensive depth. But Tampa does have Hedman, who's coming off of an injury, so we'll have to see how that goes. And now people are saying, Tampa, they're notoriously for choking. But you know what happened to Washington last year? They were chokers before, and everyone was like, they never make it past the second round. And now that the same thing could happen to Tampa, where they make it far, and they prove all the haters wrong. But Columbus, they're not the strongest team. They gave up their future for what? First round exit? We'll have to see, though. But in my opinion, this is one of the easiest ones to predict. Again, it could go either way because it's the NHL. Playoffs are crazy. But if Tampa loses this, I'm going to be completely shocked. Obviously, it could happen. But I have Tampa Bay winning in 5 games. Next up is Boston and Toronto. Now, last year and a couple of years ago, it was Boston, 7 games. So, do I think that Toronto will get redemption? No, I think Boston easily wins this. Well, not easily, but Toronto has had a lot more question marks than answers this season. There's been a lot of question marks with their team, with Frederik Andersen, with their defensive core, William Nylander. I just don't think that they're going to pull it off. I think that Boston has their number. Boston has just been a very impressive team. I think that they could potentially go all the way, but we'll talk more about that later. Obviously, Toronto's defense isn't the strongest. When healthy, they're decent, but I like Boston's defensive core with Chara, McAvoy, and Krug. You also got Tuukka Rask in net, who I'm a really big fan of Tuukka Rask. I think that he'll definitely do really good this series. And, you got that first line of Pastrnak, Bergeron, and Marchand. You got Krejci. You have a pretty gritty offense that I think will be able to slow down and neutralize this Toronto Maple Leafs team, which is not what they want. Toronto, they like to play it fast. They like to score a lot of goals, but I think that Boston will slow the tempo down. I think they'll neutralize the Maple Leafs for a third, not straight year, but for a third year in a row. Next up is Washington and Carolina. Now, lots of people want Carolina to move on, and some people think Carolina will move on, but I have Washington. I don't really have much to say. They're a really good team. Kempny got injured, but I don't really think that's a difference maker. Carolina's obviously riding that momentum of, they've had a pretty good season this season. But I don't have them getting past the defending Stanley Cup champions, Washington Capitals. The Carolina Hurricanes, they have no experience at all, and I just don't think that they'll make it past the powerhouse Washington Capitals. I think that one goes to maybe 5, maybe 6. But I still have Washington coming out on top. This series was very tough for me. It's Pittsburgh and the New York Islanders. Now, the New York Islanders, believe it or not, are now actually my second favorite team in the NHL. And Pittsburgh is probably one of my least favorite because I hate seeing the same teams going all the way year after year after year. So my heart really wants New York Islanders to pull it off and complete the Cinderella story. Barry Trotz, is a good coach. But my head, my gut, my gut completely says that the Pittsburgh Penguins will win this series. This will be a fun series to watch. I think that Pittsburgh just has too much experience. And yes, they have been struggling this season, but when they're struggling in the regular season and there's more doubters, that's when they start to thrive. So, the Islanders, there's some question marks with how Lehner will do, because obviously he's proven it in the regular season, but how will he do in the playoffs? Goalies are always a big question mark in the playoffs. We don't really know. And then the defensive core as well, forward, power play. There's just a lot of question marks with the Islanders, and I have the veteran Pittsburgh Penguins pulling off a win and moving on to the second round against the Washington Capitals for what feels like the 10th straight year. Moving back over to the West, we have the Calgary Flames versus the Vegas Golden Knights. This is a very, very, very tough one. You got the goaltending. Obviously, Calgary's goaltending is their biggest weak spot. Mike Smith is not consistent at all. He either has a really good game or a really bad game. And I don't think that David Rittich will do good in the playoffs at all. I think that, or he might, but I don't really see him doing that good. And obviously Vegas has Fleury, who's one of the most experienced goalies in the current NHL right now. The defensive core, I still love Calgary's defensive core. Will it be enough to pull it off? I don't know. I like Vegas's defensive core, but it's weaker compared to Calgary's. And offense is obviously very tight. We'll have to see how that goes. But I think that Vegas will do what they did to Winnipeg last year. They're going to kind of do that same treatment. They're going to neutralize the Calgary Flames offense. And Fleury's going to stand on his head. And I think that Vegas takes that series. Next up is Dallas and St. Louis. This is easy for me. If Dallas and St. Louis were to play each other, I'd have St. Louis. They just are a Cinderella story. They're riding on momentum. I hope Binnington does well. They got that really good defensive core, really good center depth, which you need in the playoffs. You got Bozak, O'Reilly, and, you need that in the playoffs. But they also got good wingers like David Perron and Tarasenko and so forth. But I have St. Louis winning that series pretty easily. I don't think that Dallas will make it that far. I think second round is the farthest they go, if that. Some people have them out of the first round, which I could see, but again, I went with my gut. But I have a St. Louis versus Vegas Golden Knights in the conference finals. But we'll get back to that after we talk about the second round East matchups. So in the East, we have the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Boston Bruins. This one is closer than lots of people may see. Tampa and Boston. I think that Boston matches up really, really well against Tampa, and I could definitely see Boston neutralizing this Tampa team and just slowing the game down and just getting some gritty goals, getting them fired up. And, they got the goaltending, you got the defense. But Tampa's just been so hot this season. And I think that's really going to... I think the big determinant of this series will be how the first round goes. If Tampa wins in 5 and Boston goes to 7, then I think that Boston will be more tired and more fatigued. And you'll see that. But if Boston wins within 5 games against the Maple Leafs, which very well could happen, and Tampa goes to 5 as well, that's going to be even tougher. But I don't think Tampa goes to 7 or 6, but if they do and Boston goes to 5, then I could definitely see for this series, the main determined factor, I think, is just how well or which team is rested up more. So it's really going to determine about the past rounds and how far they go. I haven't really said the dates, but I think that Tampa Bay moves on to the conference finals. I think that this is their year. I say that every year, but I think that this is the year where they go pretty far. They won a lot of games this season, record-breaking season, but we're going to have to see with the Pittsburgh-Washington series. And that series, I have Washington moving on. Pittsburgh, I'm not even sure if they should get past the Islanders. I think the Islanders will really tire them down. I think that Washington will breeze past Carolina and then breeze past Pittsburgh. Washington has Pittsburgh's number now. They beat them last year. I think that Washington is ready for another long run. And I think that Pittsburgh's stop will end in the second round. Washington beat them last year. They have the momentum. I think that it will be a Tampa Bay and Washington conference final. Now Vegas. We got Vegas and St. Louis in the conference finals. Who do I think is winning this? Well, St. Louis, I'm already riding St. Louis pretty hard to go all the way because, I think that they could do it. I think that if they get enough momentum, as long as they get past the first round, I think that they can make it to the Stanley Cup Finals legitimately. And that's what I have happening here. I think that the St. Louis Blues can make it all the way to the Stanley Cup final if Binnington's been playing like how he's been playing, if their defense can hold up against Vegas, which I think that definitely can, and if their offense can continue what they're doing, I think that they'll get by Vegas. That'll be a really fun series if it does happen. I really like Vegas' team. These are two teams that I very much admire. But again, in this scenario, who knows what's going to happen? These are just my predictions. But in this scenario, I have St. Louis beating the Vegas Golden Knights and moving on to the Stanley Cup Finals. Next up is Tampa Bay and Washington. I have Tampa Bay. I think that Boston is more of a better opponent and a better matchup than the Washington Capitals. I think that the Washington Capitals will be more fatigued. And, Ovi, I think his gas will run out. I think this whole team's motor will just run down. They could do it because they've done it before. But I think that this is Tampa Bay's year where they go all the way to Stanley Cup Final. No real explanation there, but I think that'll be a Tampa Bay, St. Louis Stanley Cup Final. But who do I have winning the Stanley Cup? Now I'm going to tell you a story, okay? So I've been doing the NHL Bracket Challenge for a long time. And every year when St. Louis has been in the playoffs, I always have them going all the way against Washington. Those are the two teams that I usually went with from 2014, 15, all the years that the Washington Capitals and the St. Louis Blues were in the playoffs. I always had them going to the conference finals or the finals. And then last year was the first year where I didn't take the Washington Capitals going to the finals in like 3 years. And that was the year they won the Stanley Cup. Maybe this is just me, but I don't want to make the same mistake that I made with Washington, where I go with them every year, and then the year I don't go with them, they win the Stanley Cup. And I think that's what's going to happen. I have St. Louis winning the Stanley Cup. Could you imagine the storyline of that? Again, I said earlier, their coach got fired. They were not doing good. Binnington, the rookie goalie, steps up. Imagine it's like kind of the Pittsburgh run that they had when they had Matt Murray the first time. Think of that, but with St. Louis and winning the first cup for the city. I have St. Louis winning. No real explanation there. Is it bias? Maybe, maybe not. I think that Tampa is a force to be reckoned with, but I'm riding with the Cinderella story, and I think that St. Louis will win the Stanley Cup champions. Thank you for watching, and let me know your predictions down in the comment section below. I know that there could be some heat down there because, people are pretty strong about their opinions, and they don't want to be wrong, but all of these series could go either way if you really think about it. So don't get mad at me in the comments. Don't get mad at other people in the comments. Just respect each other. But that's all for me now. I'll see you in the next one. Take care and goodbye.